Hello. Let's talk about arrays. This is the stuff that we're gonna deal basically in chapter 6 and 7 of your ninth edition. But once again, don't concentrate on the actual chapter numbers. Let's concentrate on the topic. So I'm gonna put this situation where we have uh, 5 different temperatures, right, for 5 different days. Or let's do 3 to make it simpler, right? So I'm going to collect uh, the temperatures for 3 days. Okay, and now the way that we know how to do this, I need to create a scanner object, right? So for that, we need to create or to import our classes. Okay? And here, I'm going to create an object. So I'm gonna say it's an instance of the scanner class. I'm gonna call it input. Okay, so we have done this before. Is equal to a new scanner object, and the system.in means that we're going to get the input from the keyword. Okay, so now I'm going to collect the information, right? So here I'm going to just basically prompt the user what we need, like enter temperature for day 1. Okay, and this is the old way or the hard way of doing this. Okay, so now we're gonna get this as a double, and then we're gonna create a variable. So we're gonna call it temperature day 1, and then that's equal, and then here, we're just gonna say input next double. Okay, basically entering our value. Okay, and then just basically this, we're gonna get our 3 values, right? So enter temperature for day 2, and then we're gonna do this, and then day 3. Okay, so now I'm going to Control A, Control I, right, to indent. Okay, and here, now if I run this, I'm just gonna print the temperature for just day 3, day 1. I'm just gonna say here, the temperature for day 1 is, and then here I'm just gonna print now temperature day 1. Okay. And then you can do the same for day 2, day 3, which we'll not do right now. And then if I wanted to get the average, I will have to add the 3 variables, right? So here maybe we can do that. So we can say double average temperature, and then here we're gonna get this is temperature. I thought I had that in my page, which I don't. Temperature for day 1 plus temperature for day 2 plus temperature for day 3, right? All that divided by 3. I'm missing something here. What you don't like? I need my semicolon. Okay. And then you can print that, right? We can print the average. So let's go and print okay, so you can see I have my input, my calculations, and my output. Okay, so here we can say average temperature is, and then we put here average temp. Now let's run our program. Okay, so temperature for day 1, we got 36.5. Let's go with numbers that we know. Let's go 45.5. Day 2, 55.5. Okay, and then we got something in between. Well, let's go with 50.1, which is close. Right. And then you see here we have my display and with my calculations and my average. You can double check that, right? Which I recommend that, like 45.5 plus 55.5 plus 50.1, all that divided by 3. Voila, so it works. Okay, well here you can see the inconvenience because if I want to, let's say, add a day 4, or if I want to do other things like get standard deviation, so on and so forth, my calculation gets complicated. So enter arrays. Every time that you are dealing with numbers that are related to each other or strings that are related to each other, you can consider these records. Okay, so here, what I will do, I will declare an array. Okay, so let me type that. Okay, so my array, this is how you start declaring your array, will be of the double type. I'm gonna call it average temperature. Okay. Now I'm gonna say that the name, sorry, I have to say that it's an array, so I need to indicate that with bracket. So this is a single array, so I'm gonna say that this is a new, okay, and then double, and then the number of elements is 3. But here I will put a 2, right? Because it goes 3 elements. Okay, so you can put here 3 elements, which is the 0, 1, and 2. Okay, this number 2 is the index. Pretty much it's telling you how many spaces you are going to separate. If you look here in the first page of your chapter, in line number 4, they declare an array where number of elements is 100. That means that it will go all the way from 0 to 99. These are the number of spaces that you are allocating for this particular array. So I'm doing the same for average temperature. Okay, so what this means is that now instead of having 3 different variables, okay, so I'm gonna go first with an efficient way. I can say that this is average, okay, temp, and then 0, which is my first element. Okay, actually I need to change my variable name to temperature day. I'm gonna call this temperature day, right, with no numbers, and then this is temperature day. Okay. And the other thing that I need to do is get rid of the double. I don't need to declare it anymore. It's already declared. Okay, so now let's say for temperature, the second temperature, temperature day 2, the subscript of this will be 1. And then for the other temperature will be 3. Okay. Then if I run my program, it should work the same. So now here I'm getting temperature, the first temperature. Okay. And now I need to add the 3 of them and take the average. Okay, so this is 1 and 2. Okay, and then I'm gonna run it. Okay, so let's enter the same values: 45.5, 55.5, 50.1. Okay, it didn't like the last one. Okay, okay, and the reason is because actually here I need to put a number 3 because I need 3 elements, which is 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so let's run this again. Okay, so you see that the importance of trying. Everyone makes errors, right? So before I type bunches of code, I go one by one and I try and I run and I compile and I try. And if I get an error, I fix it right away. But I understand in line by line what is happening in my code, right? And that's kind of like what I'm doing here. I'm going with no script. I'm just doing this. Okay, so now let me keep improving this. Why have, so I made an array because I have related values. Okay, but here you can see that I have repeated actions. So every time that we see things that are repeated, we gotta start thinking about a for loop. Okay, so let's do something. Let's create a variable, and this variable, uh, I'm gonna call it number of days, and then that's gonna be equal to 3. Okay, because now instead of having here number 3, which is doesn't have a meaning for me, if I come here and I get this variable here, now it makes sense, right? So when someone asks you, how many values are you getting? You go like, well, 3 because it's defined by this number of days. Okay, so that's my maximum. So now here, instead of having 3 separate commands doing the same thing, I'm gonna put a for loop because that's what we need for loop, right? So I go from integer equal to 0, okay, I need I equal to 0. I is usually the way, or here you can put here days, something more meaningful instead of I. And then say days less than number of days, okay? And then days plus plus, okay? So now we have a for loop, okay? And here you're gonna use my curly bracket, so it's gonna be inside here. Okay, so technically I just need these 2 lines, right? Because this is what is getting repeated. So I'm gonna move them here. And I can get rid of these 2. I don't need them anymore. Okay, or you can block comment and then clean later. So I'm just gonna add a block comment. Okay, so now things are gonna change. So I'm gonna say enter temperature for day. So you can put a quotation here, okay, to make it more flexible, and then say plus days. Okay, so now it's gonna print the number of days. You can start with 0. And then here, now instead of having 0, I have my index, which is days. It's gonna go from 0 all the way to number 2. And then you're gonna enter double. So now let's try that. So now it should go from 0 all the way to 2, less than 3. We run it, and then temperature for day 0, 45.5, then 55.5, okay, then 50.1. Voila, it works. Okay, so my array worked. In terms of the actual declaration, let me just go here to the textbook. You can see here the declaration basically will be, right, again, the type of array, the name of the array, and then here you create a new copy of it, and then the size. Okay, and we can see that the size can be anything. One nice thing that you can keep doing here, if you want to keep growing your program. So now here you have a fixed value. So how you can get rid of a fixed value, make it more dynamic. You can create an input. So let me move my scanner to the top. Okay, and then you can say here, okay, for how many days you are collecting data, and then here put a quotation mark, and then here you can pretty much user input, okay, and then here you can say that this is a next integer, okay, and now the number of days, or actually you can just put here number of days. Okay. So now it's a user input. Okay. And then when you run this, you can have the user entering for how many days? So for day 0, 45.5, for day 1, 55.5, day 2, 50.3, okay, average 54. No, it was 50.1. Well, you hear, the nice thing is that you can now make this variable, right? So if the user enters 6, so pretty much you have now more days, right? Okay. And then, so now it will keep going and going. Let's go with the display. So now I don't need this, so I'm just gonna get rid of this portion. Let's go with displaying the values. Okay. So technically, you can just use this same for loop. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy and paste it here. Okay. But now, all I need to do is just replace my display output and put it here. So the temperature for day, and then here you can put days. Plus, and then plus, and then here is, and then here you pretty much print the temperature, but notice that my index needs to change. So I'm just gonna go here with days. Let me indent everything, Control A, Control I, and then I'm just gonna run. For how many days are we collecting data? Let's say 3 again. So 45.5, 55.5, 50.1, and notice that now it displays my 3 values. Okay, temperature for day 0, day 1, day 2, and then here I get the average. There are things that you can do. For example, here you can, if you don't like the day 0, day 1, day 2, you can just add +1. Okay, and then let's run this. I will collect data for 3 days. For day 0 is 45.5, 55.5, 50.1, and notice, no, I didn't like that. So let's try something different. Right here, you see that it give me 0 and 1. That's something that you can do. You can create a new variable, right, and then start at 1. Let's just call it temp, and the temp calculation. Okay. And then you can say the temp calc is equal, and then let's bring this guy here, this +1. I like to do that because that way I keep track of what is going on. Okay. And then I don't have to mess with the subscript. Right? I just keep better track of, you can call it like actual days instead of temp calc. And then let's run it again. Notice how I run my program as many times as possible. I get the wrong input in there. Something we'll do later with try and catch. So I need 3 days, 45.5, 55.5, 50.1. And notice that now instead of having 0, 1, 2, it says the temperature for day 1, temperature for day 2, temperature for day 3. What about this calculation? We don't like this either. Okay. So here I would like to get the average in a more flexible manner. So let's use again a for loop to do that. Okay. So what I have to do is basically to get the average, add all the elements, and then divide by 3, which is the size of the array. Okay, so I put here calculate average. So for that, I will need to initialize my sum. So I'm gonna say that sum is equal to 0. That's right before my average. Okay, so let me finish here with my curly bracket. Okay, so now I need to add sum to the actual temperature for day 0. Right, so I will need to add that to temperature day, and then here I will use my subscript days. Okay, so technically here I do all the sums. Okay. And then to get the average temperature, right, so let's declare this again. I deleted by mistake. Put a V. All you have to do is get the sum and divide that by the length of the array. But how do I know how many elements I have in my array? So you can use one of the methods, right? You can use dot length, okay? And then pretty much use that for your calculation, right? Here, my sum needs to be a double. Okay. Okay, and now let's try again. So now I have a loop taking care of my average. Okay, so 3 days for collecting data, 45.5. Let's run again. 3 days, 45.5, 55.5, and 50.1. Okay, and you can see that it works the same. So this is one of the powers for using array. Pretty much makes the calculation of related records easier, right? And the handling of data. Okay. There are other ways that you can pretty much declare arrays. So notice here they already give me the 4 values. So this is an array of size 4. This is pretty uncommon to do this, but this line here is equivalent of basically initializing an array of 4 and then storing the 4 values in this manner. But you can see that here it might be somewhat inflexible, right? So that's an approach that I use much. This section is nice because it tells you the things that you can do with the arrays, right? So here you have loops that you can use. This loop here is for initializing arrays. Here you have a loop for initializing array with random values. This is the loop that I use for displaying arrays. Okay. Here is the loop that I use for summing all the values, right? And then later you can then get the average and things like that. And then you can go pretty much through the different type of arrays or different type of loops.